So in this video, we're going to be talking about a simple machine screw. So a screw is a simple machine that consists of an inclined plane that's wrapped around a cylinder. Screws are used to hold things together. When you use a screw, you apply the force to turn the inclined plane. The screw then applies a greater force to the object where it's being turned on. So we're going to be looking at a few examples of screws. For example, this water bottle here has a screw. It's located over here. This over here is the screw and this is the bottle. So what I'm doing is I'm turning this bottle cap and eventually I'm applying this force on the bottle cap, which then leads to a greater force which the screw has on the bottle cap, making the bottle cap still in place. Another area where you can find screws is light bulbs. This area over here, as it's tightly closed in with a screw, as it's able to lock in. Alright, there's some properties that when it comes to screws. The first part is thread and the next part is pitch. So the thread are these outer circles of these outer parts over here. These outer parts over here, that's the thread. But the distance between these two threads is the pitch. So the thing is, for some screws, they may have less threads and a higher pitch, or a bigger pitch. But for other screws, they may have more threads and a smaller pitch. Well, what are some advantages to these mechanical differences? Well, it just so happens that when you have a screw that has more threads but a smaller pitch, all it does is that it reduces the effort needed to turn that inclined plane. However, the thing is that it'll take a longer time to actually make everything go into the object. Meanwhile, for this screw, this takes much more time. This takes much more energy and effort, since it needs to be dug more deeper to be able to get into that object. However, it takes much less time since there are less threads. We can also see this proportional relationship in regular inclined planes in our inclined plane video. So in that video, we talked about even though this is a steeper inclined plane, it uses more effort but takes less time. But this, even though it's a less steep inclined plane, it takes less effort but more time. So we can see how these two are proportional to each other. So if we were to apply that same logic to a screw, that would also show how they're proportional to each other. Now, one way that we show how an inclined plane is wrapped around this cylinder, which then creates the screw, I'll show you how the threads with this inclined plane works. So if you have a small inclined plane, and when I wrap it around, so when we have a longer inclined plane, even though it takes less effort, it requires more time. So with the longer inclined plane or the purple inclined plane, we see that there's more threads over this certain distance of this pitch over here. But for this blue inclined plane, since it was a shorter inclined plane, what happens is that it requires more effort but less time, as we just explained over here. So this has a higher pitch but less threads. So in conclusion, screws are basically a simple machine that uses an inclined plane and that's wrapped around the cylinder. These screws are used to hold things together. When you use a screw, you apply a force on that inclined plane. Now, determining on how much force is used is basically determined based on the pitch and seeing the distance or the pitch and the number of threads there are.